Breaking developments now in the baffling disappearance of an 84-year-old woman from her quiet Tucson home. Federal authorities have dramatically intensified their efforts as the case enters its 46th day, shifting from a routine missing person search to what increasingly looks like the hunt for a deliberate, long-planned predator. Investigators are zeroing in on a chilling series of pre-abduction sightings that have completely rewritten the story investigators thought they were chasing. The centerpiece of this pivot is a shadowy figure captured on neighborhood surveillance in the weeks leading up to the night she vanished. Security footage pulled from multiple angles has confirmed the presence of an unidentified man on the property's front porch, first spotted as early as mid-January. In one sequence, he appears carrying a dark backpack and what analysts now believe is a concealed holster. In a later image, the same individual returns without the tactical equipment, moving with the casual confidence of someone who has already mapped the terrain. These separate appearances are no longer viewed as random trespassing. They point unmistakably to reconnaissance, repeated visits designed to study routines, test response times, and identify weak points in the home's modest security setup. The discovery has sent ripples of unease through the affluent Catalina foothills neighborhood. Residents who once exchanged polite waves now scrutinize every unfamiliar face and vehicle that passes. Agents have fanned out door to door, armed with enhanced stills from the footage and a narrow but critical time window, the late evening hours of January 11th. That date has emerged as the earliest confirmed contact, the moment the threat transitioned from hypothetical to tangible. Forensic digital specialists recently performed an invasive chip-off recovery on a damaged Nest camera that had initially yielded nothing. By physically extracting and reading the memory modules, technicians resurrected deleted or overwritten segments that placed the suspect squarely at the front door nearly 3 weeks before the abduction. The pattern of the visits is equally unsettling. Appearances cluster almost exclusively on weekend nights, January 11th, January 24th, and the overnight transition of January 31st into February 1st, the very evening the woman disappeared. Behavioral analysts describe this rhythm as classic weekend warrior predation, an offender who maintains an ordinary weekday existence elsewhere, possibly commuting into Tucson for carefully timed operations. The discipline suggests planning, patience, and a level of local familiarity that has investigators quietly expanding their suspect pool beyond drifters or opportunists to include anyone who could plausibly blend into the area's service economy or transient rental scene. Adding urgency to the timeline is a fresh daytime sighting that has agents combing a single block of Via Entrada, the narrow street that borders the rear of the property. Witnesses reported a nondescript sedan lingering unusually long around 10 a.m. on January 31st, the same day the victim was taken later that night. The vehicle did nothing overtly suspicious. It simply idled in a place where no resident's car should have idled. That subtle anomaly now anchors an intense 90-minute canvas for any private camera that might have caught a license plate, make, model, or even a fleeting glimpse of the driver. Authorities believe this final daylight pass was a last confirmation of occupancy before the nighttime strike. Every digital breadcrumb is being chased with equal ferocity. Retail analysts have traced the distinctive backpack seen in the early footage to a popular, widely available hiking model sold at big box stores across the region. A noticeable uptick in sales of that exact item in the Tucson metro area during the preceding 2 months has prompted a painstaking review of transaction logs, loyalty accounts, and nearby cellular pings. Though the gear itself is common, the localized spike offers one more narrow thread in a web investigators are determined to pull until it unravels a name. The atmosphere in the once tranquil streets has grown thick with suspicion. Neighbors replay mundane encounters in their minds. Delivery drivers, landscapers, utility workers, weekend renters who vanished shortly after the news broke, searching for the detail they missed. Federal presence has become constant. Unmarked vans parked discreetly, agents moving methodically from house to house, forensic technicians dusting railings and porches that had already been processed weeks earlier. The message is unmistakable. This is no longer a disappearance. This is the reconstruction of a meticulously executed crime, and the clock is ticking against an offender who has already proven disturbingly adept at staying ahead of the pursuit. The investigation's momentum has carried agents deeper into the neighborhood's everyday fabric, where the line between ordinary commerce and sinister opportunity has begun to blur. A sprawling luxury home construction site less than 200 yards from the victim's front gate now commands the largest share of federal attention. Crews had been framing the massive residence throughout January and into early February, their scaffolding and elevated platforms offering unobstructed sightlines straight into surrounding backyards, including the one where an 84-year-old woman lived alone. From those heights, a worker in a high-visibility vest could watch routines unfold without ever raising alarm. The precise time porch lights flicked on, the frequency of visitor cars, the solitary silhouette moving behind curtained windows late at night. Investigators have demanded and largely received every personnel roster tied to the project. General contractors, electricians, plumbers, drywall hangers, landscape installers, and the informal day laborers who arrive in battered pickups each morning seeking cash work. Cross-referencing those names against criminal databases, immigration records, and travel patterns has become a grinding round-the-clock operation. The logic is stark. Construction traffic provides perfect cover. A stranger can loiter for hours, park in plain view, even step onto adjacent property under the guise of retrieving tools or measuring a boundary line. If the suspect spent any time on that job site, he would have enjoyed both vantage and alibi while mapping his target. Parallel to the labor sweep, cyber forensics teams have unearthed a troubling digital prelude. In the final weeks before her disappearance, the victim contacted friends and relatives about repeated unauthorized access to her Facebook Messenger account. Messages appeared that she had never sent. Login alerts arrived from unfamiliar devices at odd hours, once at 3:17 a.m. Security logs show the intrusions were brief but persistent, always occurring when she was most likely asleep. Experts consulted by the task force described the pattern as consistent with targeted reconnaissance rather than broad credential stuffing. Someone may have been quietly harvesting schedule details: who visited when, how often she left the house, whether family stayed overnight, or simply confirming she lived without daily in-person oversight. That digital footprint dovetails disturbingly with the physical one. The same disciplined weekend cadence that marks the porch sightings appears in the timing of the hacks. Most occurred late Friday through early Sunday mornings. Behavioral profilers now treat the online breaches as an extension of the casing visits, two strands of the same long-game strategy. If confirmed as connected, the combination would mark this offender as unusually sophisticated, capable of blending low-tech physical surveillance with mid-level cyber intrusion, all while leaving minimal traceable residue. Tension between federal and local authorities has meanwhile boiled into public view. Sources within the investigation describe early friction that delayed full FBI integration by critical days. Local deputies reportedly resisted handing over scene logs and witness statements, citing jurisdictional protocol, while the sheriff's office pursued leads that federal analysts later deemed tangential. Those missteps are now under formal review, with some senior agents privately characterizing the initial response as fragmented and ego-driven. The discord has fed a growing recall campaign against the county sheriff, whose public persona, frequently polished for local media, stands in sharp contrast to the raw frustration voiced by neighbors and victim advocates. Petition organizers claim more than 60,000 signatures already, though the effort remains divisive. Supporters argue accountability is overdue, while defenders insist the political noise only handicaps the search. Adding to the unease is a grim civilian find in a nearby desert wash, a shallow, sandy channel that carries monsoon runoff past the edge of the subdivision. Amateur searchers combing the area last week located a small pile of discarded clothing and personal items: tan capri pants caked with dust, matching slip-on shoes, a worn knee brace, and a heavy quilted bedspread folded into a tight bundle. The blanket in particular has unsettled those closest to the case. Blood evidence recovered from the front porch had stopped abruptly at the threshold, a clean termination that often indicates the victim was quickly wrapped or covered before being moved. Though laboratory testing is ongoing and officials caution the items could prove unrelated, perhaps debris from a transient camp, the proximity and composition have forced the task force to treat the discovery as a priority lead. Every new thread tightens the circle, yet the central figure remains elusive. The man on the porch, the idling sedan on Via Entrada, the hacked messages, the construction site shadows, all converge on a single unsettling conclusion. This was no crime of impulse. The perpetrator chose his moment with precision, exploited the ordinary rhythms of an affluent neighborhood, and vanished into the same landscape he had studied for weeks. As agents chase retail receipts, utility logs, and genetic profiles still processing in distant labs, the desert sun continues its relentless arc, marking each passing hour that an elderly woman remains missing, her fragile health hanging in the balance, and her family left to endure a nightmare that grows more elaborate and more chilling with every revelation. The deepening layers of evidence have forced investigators to confront an uncomfortable possibility. The perpetrator may not have been a complete outsider. Forensic digital reconstruction has revealed that the front door Nest camera was not simply obscured or avoided, it was deliberately disabled at 1:47 a.m. on the night of the abduction. The disconnection required precise knowledge of the device's mounting location, wiring path, and power source. A masked figure can be seen in the final frames, reaching upward with practiced efficiency, severing the feed in under 12 seconds. That level of mechanical familiarity has shifted suspicion toward anyone who might have had legitimate secondary access to the home in recent months. Repair technicians, maintenance workers, or even a trusted service provider who had been inside the residence before. Compounding this line of inquiry is a cold clinical detail pulled from the victim's medical telemetry. Her implanted pacemaker linked to a mobile monitoring app transmitted its last heartbeat data at 2:28 a.m., 41 minutes after the camera went dark. The abrupt cessation of signal, combined with the absence of any distress call or alarm activation, paints a picture of swift incapacitation followed by rapid removal from the premises. Medical consultants working with the task force note that an 84-year-old with known cardiac fragility could not have survived prolonged physical struggle without triggering irregular rhythms that would have registered earlier. The tight timeline suggests either overwhelming force or a chemical restraint administered almost immediately upon entry. Financial records have added another dimension of premeditation. In the 6 weeks preceding the disappearance, a series of cash withdrawals, each deliberately capped below $9,000, were made from multiple local branches. The pattern mirrors techniques sometimes used to build an untraceable reserve for extended evasion or to fund a prolonged operation. While the amounts themselves are modest, their frequency and timing have prompted analysts to map the transactions against cellular tower data in hopes of identifying a recurring device that hovered near ATMs on the same days the victim was targeted during reconnaissance visits. The retail trail tied to the suspect's distinctive 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack has narrowed considerably. Regional point-of-sale data shows a modest but statistically notable cluster of purchases for that exact model in the greater Tucson area between late December and mid-January. Agents are now cross-referencing buyer information where available through loyalty programs or credit card linkages with geotagged cell activity and license plate readers positioned along major arteries leading into the Catalina foothills. Though the item is inexpensive and widely stocked, the localized concentration offers one of the few concrete purchase anchors in an otherwise elusive profile. Community vigilance has produced both breakthroughs and complications. The wash discovery continues to dominate discussion. Forensic teams have confirmed trace biological material on the recovered bedspread, consistent with human blood, though DNA sequencing remains pending due to degradation from sun and wind exposure. The tan capri pants and knee brace show signs of recent wear, with soil embedded in the treads matching the composition of the surrounding desert. While officials stop short of declaring the item's definitive evidence, the ensemble's appearance so close to the crime scene has intensified calls for expanded ground searches across adjacent arroyos and abandoned lots. Public pressure on the family has meanwhile taken a darker turn. The victim's daughter, thrust into the national spotlight, has faced an unrelenting barrage of online vitriol. Commentators dissect her every television appearance, criticizing posture, tone, even the absence of makeup as indicators of guilt or detachment. Conspiracy threads proliferate, linking her husband's past political consulting work to far-fetched theories of targeted retribution or staged events. Investigators have repeatedly dismissed these narratives as baseless distraction, yet the digital noise persists, forcing the family to navigate grief under constant public microscope. Amid the speculation, the reward has climbed to $1.2 million for verifiable information leading to the woman's safe return, supplemented by a separate $500,000 pledge directed to organizations supporting missing persons cases. Public appeals have evolved from broad pleas for tips to direct emotional messages aimed at the captor, promising discreet channels for negotiation. Sources close to the effort stress that every decision, silence on certain details, measured responses to rumored ransom contacts, follows strict federal guidance designed to preserve leverage and protect any remaining chance of life-saving dialogue. As laboratory results trickle in and the construction site rosters yield their first shortlist of persons of interest, the investigation stands at a precarious inflection point. The predator's shadow stretches across digital logs, weekend patterns, elevated work platforms, and now possibly intimate knowledge of the home itself. Each revelation tightens the noose, yet the desert remains silent, holding its secrets beneath relentless sun and endless sand. For those waiting, family, neighbors, agents, the margin between hope and finality narrows with every hour that passes unmarked on day 46. The case has now crystallized into a stark contest between forensic precision and the vast, indifferent expanse of the Sonoran Desert. Every lead, however faint, circles back to the same chilling premise. The individual responsible did not act on impulse, but executed a plan refined over weeks, perhaps months. The precision disconnection of the security camera at 1:47 a.m., the pacemaker's final transmission at 2:28 a.m., the abrupt end of the blood trail at the threshold, all form a compressed sequence that speaks of confidence bordering on arrogance. This was someone who had rehearsed the approach, anticipated obstacles, and prepared contingencies long before the night itself. Investigators have quietly intensified scrutiny of individuals who possessed insider-level knowledge of the residence. Service records show a handful of contractors and technicians visited the home in the preceding year for routine maintenance. HVAC servicing, pool equipment calibration, even a minor electrical upgrade completed in early December. Each name has been pulled into the investigative vortex, subjected to polygraph offers, device seizures, and exhaustive timeline reconstructions. While no arrests have followed, the narrowing focus on prior access has generated the first tangible shortlist of persons of interest. Men whose weekend schedules, vehicle registrations, and digital footprints align uncomfortably well with the porch sightings and the Via Entrada sedan. The financial angle continues to yield subtle but persistent signals. The sub-$9,000 cash withdrawals form a deliberate staircase pattern totaling just over $40,000 across 7 weeks. Geolocation data places several of those transactions within a tight radius of the construction site and the victim's neighborhood, often within hours of the suspect's documented weekend appearances. Cellular analysts have isolated a single recurring burner phone that pinged towers along the same corridor on multiple relevant dates, its activity spiking during the late-night hours when the porch visits occurred and vanishing entirely after February 1st. Though the device remains dark, its abrupt silence is itself treated as probative, a calculated discard signaling the transition from preparation to execution. In the wash, forensic progress inches forward. Mitochondrial DNA sequencing on the bedspread has returned partial profiles consistent with an elderly female donor, though contamination from environmental exposure has complicated full nuclear matching. The knee brace carries microscopic fibers matching those found embedded in the porch blood spatter, offering the strongest physical bridge yet between the crime scene and the desert discard site. Authorities have expanded grid searches along the Arroyo system, deploying cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar in areas downstream where seasonal floods could have carried additional evidence. The effort is exhaustive but grim, each sweep reminding responders that time and terrain remain the perpetrator's strongest allies. Public sentiment in Tucson has fractured under the weight of prolonged uncertainty. Candlelight vigils still gather at the neighborhood entrance each weekend, yet whispers of doubt have crept in. Some residents quietly resent the persistent federal presence, roadblocks, hovering drones, endless knock-and-talks, while others accuse neighbors of willful blindness during the suspect's months-long reconnaissance. The sheriff's recall petition has surpassed 90,000 signatures, with a special election now scheduled for late spring. Whether the political upheaval will ultimately aid or hinder the investigation remains fiercely debated, but it has undeniably amplified the case's national profile, drawing armchair detectives and true crime enthusiasts who flood tip lines with theories ranging from plausible to unhinged. For the family, the ordeal has entered its most punishing phase. Public statements have grown sparse and carefully worded, each appearance carrying the visible toll of exhaustion and guarded hope. The $1.2 million reward stands unchanged, yet no credible proof of life has surfaced since the early unverified ransom contacts. Federal negotiators maintain discreet back channels, prepared for any genuine outreach, while quietly dismissing the parade of imposters and extortion attempts that inevitably follow high-visibility cases. The daughter's tearful televised pleas, once broad calls for help, have narrowed to a single raw message directed at the captor. A mother's promise to listen, to protect, to do whatever is required if only her elderly parent can be returned alive. As day 46 fades into evening, the desert assumes its familiar duality, beautiful and merciless. Towering saguaros stand sentinel over quiet streets where porch lights now burn longer, where every shadow draws a second glance. Somewhere within that landscape, or perhaps far beyond it, the man who studied an 84-year-old woman's routines, hacked her quiet digital life, and struck with surgical efficiency, continues to exist in the ordinary world. The FBI's task force, bolstered by behavioral profilers, cyber specialists, financial trackers, and forensic geneticists, remains locked in pursuit, determined to convert scattered breadcrumbs into an inescapable chain of evidence. For those who loved her, the mathematics are brutally simple. Fragile heart, missing medication, 6 weeks gone. Yet, beneath the statistics endures an unshakable conviction. Someone saw something. Someone knows the face behind the weekend visits. Someone holds the final piece that can end this engineered silence. In the gathering dusk over the Catalina foothills, the search presses forward, not with certainty of success, but with the fierce, unrelenting refusal to let one life slip quietly into the archive of the unsolved. The porch still stands empty, the wash still whispers, and the question that haunts every room in Tucson tonight remains unchanged. Who watched? Who waited? And where is she?